I definitely think that I have some self-inflicted pressure. Other people talk about internships and jobs, so you feel the pressure to know what you're doing after college.
Oh yeah, I definitely act like everything's okay. Because I mean, you don't want people to think that you're stressed. I think that's kind of a sign of weakness.
Definitely a lot of people try to go about like they're not experiencing any stress and they can handle anything. But it's difficult to have it all together, and it's okay to let that out sometimes.
Experts say college students and young adults are so overwhelmed with the pressures to keep up appearances that they're succumbing to anxiety and depression in record numbers. So, audience, for those of you who have kids who are college age, young adults, are you confident that they're ready for the pressures that are ahead of them? Let me see some moms. Moms, here, go on, take it away.
I think they think they're ready, but they're not ready until they're in that environment. My daughter just went back to school. She's a senior in college. And she called me 2 days later, and she had a shingle outbreak.
She did?
Yes.
At a young age?
At a young age. Well, she had them at 12, and now she's 21, and she's got them again. So internally, they just hold it in, and it affects them physically.
Yeah. Who else has thoughts on this? Go pass it up.
I have 2 in college, and I think a lot is about giving the kids tools before they leave for college, and then checking in all the time, whether they want to hear from you or not, calling them all the time, weekly, multiple times a week, to make sure that everything's going okay.
Do you think those tools got her adequately ready, or is it just the beginning process?
I try to give both kids a lot of independence before they leave for college. So by the time they are in college, it's not a brand new thing.
Perfect. Now, I'm going to just pick up on these 2 points here and show you something that may change your mind a little bit about your kids. And by the way, we were all there too, right? So this is also about our lives as we're going through those young adult years. Your child may not be as grown up and as ready for adult pressures as you think, and here's the biological reason for it. I have these scans up here on the wall. And these scans are called functional MRI scans. They're really cool scans that look at the different things happening in your brain, specifically how it's actually functioning and doing things and processing information. The prefrontal cortex is all up here. That's the decision-making part of the brain. That's where all the action is. When you're a 5-year-old, there's not a lot of blue there. It's mostly this yellow and red. That means it's immature. Blue is good. Blue means mature, normal, ready to go out and do what needs to be done. You get to be a preteen, and we all, when you're a preteen, life's challenging sometimes. And not surprisingly, you have the ability to do lots of things. You can run, you can walk, you can fight with your parents, but you're not that mature up here in the prefrontal cortex, so it's a difficult time to process some of this complex information. Then thankfully, you become a teenager where, again, you're really blue, really mature, except that one little place, the prefrontal cortex, where they're still green. Now, most of us think once you get past your teen years, you're really good to go. But this is the shocking part of this. A 20-year-old brain still has green, immature areas in the prefrontal cortex. Still has places that aren't ready to make complex decisions, which means when you're really calm, you do great. But when you're under stress, you reveal problems. Problems sometimes that are imperceptibly big to the people who love you. Allison Malman's brother Brian was a senior at Columbia University when he killed himself. Since then, she founded Active Minds, an organization that uses students to help get rid of the stigma of mental health on college campuses. Dr. John Draper is the director of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And Dr. Allison Baker is a psychiatrist who specializes in adolescents transitioning to college. So, Allison, let me start with you. Since founding Active Minds, and I'm proud of you for doing that, you learned a lot. We've all learned a lot about how kids deal with anxiety, and they suffer depression and all kinds of challenges as they try to cope. Where does all that pressure come from?
I think we can trace it back to any number of places for any number of people. I think a lot of it is internal. Students are putting pressure on themselves. Sometimes it's coming from family, sometimes it's coming from the outside, but it's this idea of wanting to be perfect, and that pressure can become overwhelming.
Dr. Baker, where does this extreme need for perfection come from?
Kids have always felt pressure and experienced struggle. I think what's different today is that there are a couple of pieces in play. I think the increasingly unstable global economy. I think that parents with the very best of intentions and a strong desire to set their children up for success sometimes contribute to generating more anxiety and apprehension about success and provide a lot of scaffolding and mapping for their children, as opposed to kids having the opportunity to figure it out for themselves.
I love that you use the word scaffolding rather than trying to get past the helicopter parenting issues that we all cope with. So I've got a 16-year-old who I can guarantee you on those functional MRI scans would have not a lot of blue in the front of the brain. And so is Oliver, and I were having a conversation recently, and I finally said, honey, you know, who's going to teach my grandson to be a man? Because I'm not going to be there. And it was one of the few times I actually got him sort of quiet down and process a reality. A, that I wasn't going to be there, but B, he'll have to do it one day. And I do feel an obligation, I think we all do as parents, to sort of pass that baton on, that, you know, at some point you got to do it for your own. And it's not so much how I judge you. I know this seems easy in a quiet environment to get across, but it's in the heat of the moment where we struggle with this. Dr. Draper, are you surprised that some of these young adults are just not coping?
I can understand what all the pressures are, certainly. And we know that this is a very difficult time of life with no life experience, really, to teach them or to draw from in terms of how they can deal with it. We know that 1 in 6 kids right now in high school are thinking seriously about suicide.
1 in 6?
1 in 13 are attempting suicide.
You're kidding me.
Dr. Oz...
Did anyone know that? These numbers are not even close to what I would expect.
They're staggering, Dr. Oz. And what this is telling us is that basically the number 2 killer of kids is life and not knowing how to deal with it.
So help me with this a little bit. What are the warning signs? If 1 in 6 kids is thinking about it, we must be able to figure out who's at risk.
There's a few things, naturally, we need to be looking for. First and foremost, the most obvious thing is when somebody is talking about suicide and wishing to die. But still, a lot aren't, nearly half aren't. So we need to be thinking about these other warning signs, and that is an increased use of alcohol and drugs, for example. And we know that that itself can be deadly, but that's their way of coping, and it's not a good coping strategy. Another important one to be looking out for is feelings of hopelessness. We also are looking at things like feeling trapped and alone, where you feel like there's no way out of this hopelessness, that this intolerable pain that you're experiencing is not going to end and no one is going to be able to help you or understand. We're also thinking about things like sleeplessness. Sleeplessness is a big sign. Also losing interest in things you once enjoyed. Those are all things that we need to be looking out for. But lack of social supports, again, what the lady said in the audience, you got to be there for your kid, is very important.
So Allison, what can colleges do differently? Dr. Baker, thoughts on that?
I mean, I think one of the things that colleges need to do is continue to build an environment where students are allowed and open to share their real experiences that will really create a space where young adults feel comfortable reaching out for the help that they both need and they deserve.
So I've been thinking about happiness a lot, and mental health is part of that equation. And as part of it, I took this course called Mental Health First Aid to help identify the pressures that your child is under. Anyone can take the course, by the way. It's open to take it. And one of the most important things I learned is that you have to ask kids how they're doing, but you got to do it without implying judgment. Just check it in, how you doing, and then ask the follow-up questions as appropriate.
I definitely feel like I'm under a lot of academic pressure. It mostly comes from my parents and like society, I guess.
It's been so hard adjusting, and like I'll always like look okay, but like sometimes I'll like sit in my room and just cry.
I've never even heard of it, but yeah, I relate to Doug syndrome.
Many argue that perfectionism is one of the most destructive diseases among American children. We've heard it on the stage today as well. You agree or disagree with that premise? Hands up. Let me hear from the college students out there. And again, there's no right or wrong answers, so don't feel pressure over this. But I do want to understand what your perspective is. What in particular drives you to desire perfection, and where's that pressure coming from? Thoughts from young women, young men? Go ahead.
Honestly, I just see other people, like, you know, whatever they post on Snapchat, they're like getting A's or anything because kids post everything. And I'm like, oh, wow, maybe I need to step up my game because I'm constantly like on social media and I see all these things. And yeah.
Life seems better over there.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that. That's a really important insight. Go ahead.
I think that the main desire to have perfection is the fact that you want to be the best you can be. You want to make yourself proud at the end of the day. I don't think it's so much comparing yourself to other people. I don't do that personally. But I think a lot of people do that. They're like, oh, she got the 90. I want the 95. And I think we have to look within inside of ourselves and find who we are, who is the best self we are, you know?
Who wants to add to the conversation? Yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of the pressure can come from parents indirectly too, just because they've worked so hard to sacrifice everything for us, so we want to be able to give back in return, and that's through our grades.
It's guilt, crazily,
Absolutely.
guilt. So why is it difficult to reach out if you're having a problem?
We just don't want to seem weak. We want to seem like we've had it together, just like we've had it the entire time throughout high school. And it just seems like everyone else, like they were saying, via social media, is having a really great time, that it's really easy for them. So we don't want to seem like we're the only one that's struggling.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that for a lot of us, high school was easy compared to college. And I know personally speaking, college was probably the first time I was ever challenged academically. And I didn't really even know how to deal with challenge academically. I'd never struggled before.
So what advice would you guys give to kids who are just coming into college freshmen? Thoughts for incoming college freshmen, what would you tell them?
I completely agree with that. I personally struggled my first quarter, and I would give the advice of planning ahead in terms of when you get your papers done, when you get your work done before your social life, when you know, that type of stuff.
Go ahead, pass it to the lady in front of you. Go ahead.
Actually, I was going to say that my social life was a big part of me becoming more adjusted at school. When I was a freshman, I found this amazing support group, and they still support me every day. So if you're an incoming freshman, don't be afraid to go out there and make friends, because everybody's feeling the same way.
So we put a poll on our website asking, does helicopter parenting pressure kids into the need for perfection? Big issue. 61% said yes. Almost 2/3 of people responded. Dr. Baker, give us some advice on this helicoptering issue. How do we get comfortable letting go?
Well, we're talking about it today, so I think that's a really big step, and raising awareness that there are real costs and risks to this approach to parenting, and letting parents understand what they are and giving them an opportunity to change the way that they're doing it. Other advice is start the conversation a lot earlier. Let your kids work towards independence much, much more early than the summer before college. Teach kids the ability to figure it out for themselves while you're there to support and guide and mentor, but not necessarily scaffold and choreograph entirely for them.
Let me offer some final thoughts, because ultimately, the questions you ask are the way you show your love. People who are suffering don't often tell you they're in trouble. It's true for adults, it's true for your kids. So the next time you're on the phone with your kids, you can ask them one simple question. Are they okay? And then judge their answer and ask a follow-up question if appropriate. It's the second question, I'll learn this as a doctor, that will often give you the biggest insights. And never forget at the end of the conversation to say, I love you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on new videos to live the good life.